My name is Chris Watkins. I'm a security engineer and data engineer for 6 Feet Up. Fun fact about me is way back when I was actually a philosophy major. Now I spend a lot of time thinking deep thoughts about risk management. Um, and today, what I'm trying to do is I want to show everyone how you can use Cloud Custodian to manage your identity and access management in a vendor neutral way to have a more holistic view. And I want, when you leave here today, what I'd like to do is give everyone a way to get started at least, and then how you can build on that to have more comprehensive coverage. So starting off, this is a challenge everyone faces. I'm sure there are a lot of Cloud Custodian users and maintainers in the audience. Everyone cares about IAM. It's still a huge problem. Broken access control is currently the top 10 or the number one issue in the OWASP top 10. It's business critical, it's high risk. So, like, what is the most efficient way that we can address something like that? Before you even really start digging into it, uh, let's just have a high level overview, lay of the land, right? Multi-cloud and hybrid multi-cloud environments don't just exist, they're common and they become more common as organizations grow. Folks tend to do things in their own way that works best for them, right? Different tools for different jobs. Centralization of IAM gives us a single source of truth, on the other hand. So while you have many different platforms, you still want to have IAM centralized in some way so you can keep track of it all. And in the middle of all that, manually inventorying and auditing all this is not only time intensive, those audits, those inventories and those audit results are usually obsolete within hours after they get done because nothing ever changes, right? We're all in dynamic environments. So given that it's a common problem domain and it's pretty broad, let's narrow down our focus a little bit and focus on four key challenges that we can solve with Cloud Custodian. Here are the four, right? Users without MFA, orphan identities, overly permissive policies, and my recent personal favorite, unmet compliance requirements. First up, let's look at missing MFA, which helps us make sure we have deadbolts along with locks on all the external doors, right? So for across several different clouds, how could you check? Just a simple question. What users have access to my environment that don't have MFA enabled? We're going to start basic here. Should be ideally it's a really straightforward policy. We're talking to AWS. We just want to look at the IAM user resource and we just want to find the users that don't have MFA. Cloud Custodian has a very succinct, clear policy language that makes this a very easy thing to detect. The rule starts very simple, and running this policy will very clearly give you a list of who doesn't have MFA. If you Now, if we want to switch to Azure, and in particular, I like to call out that this is using Azure Entra ID, which is an extension of Cloud Custodian's coverage in the base engine. That's what something my team has been working on. This is doing the same thing, but for Azure at the tenant level using the Microsoft Graph API. So same question, but this is how the Microsoft Graph API defines whether or not a user has MFA access, right? So nothing really too fancy yet. Another simple one, right? Let's see how we can reduce our attack surface by finding and deleting unused roles. Again, AWS, very straightforward here, right? Given a resource, find what's not used, and in addition, take these actions. This would actually go in and delete the roles, which can be very helpful when you're careful. GCP, same move. We have old service account keys. They're older than 90 days. Maybe we don't want those around. Go ahead and delete them. Again, Cloud Custodian can scan in the environment, give you your findings, and then take actions to remediate those findings. This one is probably the most common thing that I tend to see on engagements. A lot of times, things are moving fast in an environment, and root access gets handed out kind of willy-nilly. And it also can become kind of a political issue, like who has responsibility for what, and there are negotiations there, right? So a lot of times what will happen is everyone is root, so nobody is root, except that's not really how it works at all. Now everybody is root, and your environment is very, very exposed, right? So a good question to ask is, well, how exposed are we, right? Again, a really simple AWS example. We're looking at the IAM policy resource, and we just want to see who has allow all, which we were talking about Halloween horror stories in the chat with S3 star policies. This one I think scares me more than a S3 star policy because this person could create S3 star policies. Um, Again, with Azure, now this doesn't use the Graph API or Entra ID. This exists in Cloud Custodian today, but it's a very similar policy. It's reaching up to it's reaching up to the subscription level to check the owner. What I wanted to highlight here with this policy is that these filters essentially create a funnel. They can be chained, right? We want to say, uh, go find all these roles, go get all the roles that are owners, and then we want to find the ones that are owners for the subscription. So you can start to narrow down what you're looking at. Um, Checkbox security can be controversial, but it's often necessary to validate trust, right? Like sometimes when I'm in engineering mode and I'm having to build, I can get just as aggravated. Um, Dealing with a compliance scan as any other engineer. But those checks are in place for a reason, and the goal here is for security to be an enabler. Now let's look at how Cloud Custodian can detect some specific violations for some benchmarks. I really want to focus on real world examples, right? Um, Here's the Microsoft Azure Foundations benchmark version 4.0.0 6.14, which is incredibly specific, right? I picked this one in particular, or the Azure Foundations benchmark in particular, because the CIS benchmarks are a great example of something that is technically actionable. A lot of times, compliance frameworks, they tend to fall into two high-level categories. You have control objective frameworks that are more policy-oriented, they're higher level, like we protect data. And then there are benchmark level frameworks that are much lower level, but they are discrete and actionable. And that's really where compliance tends to happen, right? So in this situation, right, the lines 2 and 3 spell out what the benchmark is checking for. Just like all our other policies, it's a very simple check. We just reach in with a filter, a value filter, and we're looking for a specific key. We want to know if we have users in the environment that are regular users that are able to create apps in Azure, right? This is authorization policy. I'd also like to call out that a lot of the Entra ID resources are actually tenant level, not just subscription level. Uh, and as a complement to a benchmark, right, this is NIST SP 853 AC7, which is another mouthful. But NIST SP 853 is a good counterpoint to the CIS benchmarks because because it's a higher level control objective framework. You can go on NIST.gov and read this, right? There's a whole lot of language in here, but specifically what we're doing here is we're mapping something very specific, a specific benchmark that's part of that framework to an actionable benchmark that we can check with Cloud Custodian. And that's a key activity that governance, risk, and compliance teams need to take on. Here are the security policies that we want. Okay, now what are the benchmarks that we need to actually go out and check against that fulfill those requirements, right? Here specifically is getting into AC7. It's at the tenant level for Entra using Entra ID, or do we have a password lockout threshold set, right? Can someone come in and just bang on the door an infinite number of times until it comes down? And we would be able to check that now. Up until now, the focus has been, okay, here are some common IAM problems, and here are some simple examples to show how Cloud Custodian can be used in a vendor-neutral, multi-cloud way to check those common issues across a wide environment, right? At this point, I want to shift focus to how, let's say you're starting from scratch, and how do you get started, and how do you build on that in a way that delivers value as fast as possible for an organization. Really, really simple. Pick one concern, what that one, like a one burning concern, a high priority concern, and just focus on trying to detect that it's happening, right? Our example here will be old access keys. This policy is a little more sophisticated, but it's really just because some of the words have moved around. The filter is up in a vars block. The notification action is in a vars block. That is so that we can reuse that in the policies, right? The filter, again, is going to look at access keys that are older than 90 days, right? And our notification action, this is something that I haven't covered in this talk yet, although others may have already covered it today, right? We can say, okay, we want to have this predefined action where we can notify via AWS SQS when we find these things. So the policy becomes more streamlined, right? And we can, in fact, not define multiple policies here to say you can have detect old access keys with different filters or different actions. So we've got where we can detect and notify, which is awesome, right? Now, at least your unknown unknowns are, it's a smaller set. Where do we go from there? Can we actually start to try to fix things? And of course, yes, we can. This is well documented stuff. Um, we have our filters are the same. Now we have remediation actions. It's very similar to the notification action. Um, but we're doing a little bit more here, right? We don't just notify, we also go ahead and remove the keys. So when you run this policy, it's going to reach out. It's going to reach out to the API. It's going to find old keys. It's going to notify, and then it's going to get rid of them. But only when you run this policy manually. Now we're getting to something, we're building on that example. Now we're getting to something even more sophisticated where we can have automated remediation, right? Can we detect, notify, and remediate all in one fell swoop? Of course we can, right? Um, Building on here now, instead of just remediation actions, we have auto remediation actions. But down at the bottom, we're talking about on line 25, we're adding the modes. And what the modes do essentially is they spawn a Lambda, and the Lambda runs the remediation action on your behalf, and it's kicked off by CloudTrail events. So you can see how these policies, you take a policy that very simply detects and notifies, and then we have a policy that detects, notifies, and remediates. And then now, because we have the capability to reach in to things like CloudTrail or other event-driven systems, now we can say, okay, now we're going to, as soon as that change is logged and that event is logged, now we can go ahead and automatically take care of it, which is a huge win. So to summarize the approach, Cloud Custodian has given you a vendor-neutral way to gain visibility across your environment, but including but not limited to IAM. Simply get started with a simple detection and notification. Move on to remediation. Um, at the remediation stage, it's probably best to have two separate policies, one to detect and one to remediate. When that approach proves out, when all the dust is settled and everyone is feeling good about it, gradually start rolling out auto remediation in a single policy so that you can detect, notify, and remediate in one step. And that's it. I'm Chris Watkins from 6 Feet Up. Any questions?